Hello, everyone. This is Zach from Ground by California, and today we've got a very special friend of GBC back on again, Miguel Crawford from the Grasshopper Adventure Series. How you doing, Mig?
Doing super. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to chatting about bikes again.
I know, geez, this is your 27th year of the Grasshopper Series. And you just had Low Gap, and I know I'll see you in a couple of weeks in Huffmaster. But obviously, you're a big fan of everything that goes on in the region, the history of bikes, and I just knew you'd be one of the best people to bring on to talk with Wendy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with her. I know her photos, of course. Charlie Kelly's book, Fat Tire Flyer, sits on my desk in the shop, and I've read it several times, and I've seen all her photos. And having grown up in Sebastopol, high school in '88, a lot of her photos are from the early '80s. So we've never met, but I know some of the people that's overlapped, and to me, that's kind of where it all started for me, is riding mountain bikes. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Okay. Now she's in the queue right now. We don't quite have a camera for her, but I think we're going to bring her in because we do have plenty of pictures, which I'm sure we'll be talking about. And let's tag her in. So, hello, Wendy. Can you hear us?
Yes, definitely. Howdy.
Okay. Sweet. Can you see our video?
Yes.
Okay.
I can see both of you.
Okay. Well, people know you're not a little white circle. We do have some photos of you that we're going to share soon. But how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited. I'm stoked.
Well, I'm wondering, can you help her troubleshoot the video thing, Zach, or should we just go with the audio?
I think we're just going to have to go with the audio because it's going to take a while to backtrack. But we've got some pictures, and we're going to bring a lot of this stuff to life. And, same thing with, I saw the pictures that were posted in that Radivist article. I think it was like the summer of 2022.
Right.
And I knew a little bit about the history, but it really just opened a lot of doors. To like this history that I didn't know too much about, but I knew that Marin was like the birthplace of mountain biking, and you've been involved since the early age.
Well, I think I'd mentioned before that when I got my camera, it was never intended to take photos of mountain bikers or clunker riders back in the day. My whole goal was to take images of wildflowers and mushrooms and any kind of wildlife I encountered, or just Mother Nature in general. So it was a byproduct of just having my camera with me at the time. And for some reason or other, I just one day turned my camera lens on one of the riders or the bikes or whatever, and that was pretty much the beginning of the the whole bulk of my images. So, and I never left on a ride without my camera, so I had it with me 24/7 on every single ride.
Did you know, Wendy, did you know at the time you were okay, like, okay, I'm caught in a moment, not so different than people that were shooting early rock and roll scenes?
It never ever occurred to me. It was like I was in this state of being there at the moment. So it never occurred to me that, gee, one of these days, in the future, these might be relative to, what we're doing now. And the thought never, ever once occurred to me that these might have some, historic value in the future. So it was all happenstance and serendipitous. So that's really the beauty of it for me. And also, almost none of the images were staged or posed, so this was authentic. This was the real deal, like candid camera getting out there and, shooting away. And I was kind of manic about it too. I was just crazy, just constantly just shooting. I have thousands of images, not just mountain biking, but cross, mountain, cyclocross, road, and just cycling in general was my passion for decades, and it's still probably more so now than it was back in the day, because I'm looking back on it and seeing what a phenomenal occurrence happened right in my midst, and I had no idea. None of us really thought for a second that one day this was going to happen. So it was all really magic. It was just totally magical. So it's hard to explain. You almost had to be there. It was almost being in a bubble.
Let me quickly throw up some of the slideshow right here.
Yeah.
But this is a great photo, and this is a view, but I don't know exactly where, but it definitely feels like it's on the western side of the Sierra.
Yeah. This was taken by my ex-husband Larry, and he took some of the earlier mountain bike photos, especially anything that I'm in, because I always had the camera. But this was taken at Loon Lake, which is on the other side of Lake Tahoe, and this was a great place to ride. It was one of the first places we discovered outside of Marin County, and I'm obviously on my breezer, my original breezer here, but this was probably in the summer of '78, I want to say. So it looks like we're just kind of posing for the camera, and kind of, I don't know if this was a real authentic, I obviously was riding at the time, but it was more of a pose kind of thing. We were experimenting with light and action. We weren't, experienced action photographers, so we were trying to learn as we went. But yeah, I love this shot because you see the whole background of the lake, and we'd come from the very tail end there and ridden all the way around it. And at that time, no one was on a mountain bike, and so we were freaks. In fact, one of the first times we ever went up there, we ran into the Jeep Jamboree, which is this annual, it's pretty hairball Jeep thing that goes from Tahoe to, I think it goes to Georgetown or somewhere, but it's a real long, 50-mile thing that they do. And we encountered this group on one of our first rides on a mountain bike, and they were so blown away. They could not believe that anyone was riding a bicycle on what they were doing in a Jeep. So I love this photo because it just brings me right back to those moments,
Yeah.
That's the beauty of all these photos, is that they take you right back to what it was really, really like, yeah, this one's great too. I love this shot. I just pulled this one out of the vault the other day. In fact, I was telling Zach earlier that the Ratovist has really gone out of their way to scan all these older images that I'd kind of just put on the back burner and never really considered them to have any merit until recently, when I'm recognizing that these are 45, 50 years old almost. So a lot of the people that were in these images aren't with us anymore. And a lot of these people, made a huge impact on our whole cycling community and what the mountain bike is today. And they will probably never get recognized, but the fact that I captured them on film shows that they were really there and relevant in the moment, So it's been a real learning experience for me to go through these images. It's had such an emotional impact on me. Like I said, it takes me right back to the exact moment we were all just kind of hanging, and this is, you can almost feel a little tension in this photo because we're getting ready for this big, it was the local news people came all the way to Fairfax to film us on repack. So we were all in high anxiety mode here. I can just feel the tension, and that's the way it was before a lot of repack races. But this one in particular, I love it because it captures the old Fairfax, and it doesn't even look like this anymore. So it's such a step back in time. It's like a time machine.
Yeah. I love that in you know, Fairfax is my go-to spot if I'm leaving Sonoma County to go ride. I'll go park in that same spot at Split Rock and ride. But
Yeah.
nowadays, with vehicles and bikes, people don't really understand having different bike cultures in Sausalito and in Mill Valley and in Fairfax and in Stinson Beach. But looking at the bikes that they were on, you know, it makes sense that, you know, you didn't always just pop over, that they're kind of different clubs, unless, you know, and then you guys would gather for these events. So
Right,
your
right.
photos, there's a
In
lot
fact,
to,
I didn't even know that a lot of these writers even existed within the county until repack happened. And it was
right.
kind of this nucleus, you know, this is where everyone congregates who rides this clunker bike, you know, and it was a real powerful kind of thing that we had. We were like this little cult almost. It was, and we all had different names for our bikes. You know, the clunker crew was kind of from Fairfax, and that I kind of remember Fred Wolf naming the bike the clunker, and he told me that he thought it was kind of like a there used to be an old car rental company called Rent-A-Wreck. And he said it's kind of like a Rent-A-Wreck bicycle, you know. So we call them clunkers. So, but the Mill Valley guys called them ballooners, and the other, you know, uh, Larkspur guys called them bombers. And so we all had our different names, but it was technically the same kind of bike.
Meg, were you? I saw you were fumbling through a book there and kind of like going across while she was talking earlier. I'll go ahead to another slide.
Yeah, well, I've got exactly. So I've got that cover of that book out, which is such an iconic photo of Charlie. That's a great one.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I took that photo or not, but usually once I retired from racing repack, I positioned myself at camera corner. So between my ex and I, we, you know, caught every single person ever coming down multiple times. At one point, we invested in an auto winder, which sped up the film speed so that we could get, you know, sequential shots. So we captured things that, you know, would have been missed, like wrecks and, you know, crashes and just the expressions on your faces, you know, terror, and you really caught it in the moment. So we loved that part of it. It was so much fun. And then, like I said, you could just feel the tension at the top, and then at the bottom of the repack when everybody was, you know, done with their race. It was like a party atmosphere, and everybody kind of just shared their knowledge about their bike or whatever. You know, it was a community that just happened. It was like going to church. You know, every Sunday morning.
Yeah.
You know, we go to church.
Now, for the record, let it be noted that road looks extremely well graded. I was riding with Jeff Kabush a while back, and we were talking about, because he did an article about with a modern bike timing it against theirs, and of course Otis guy swears that they still have the fastest time. But I'm just looking at that road; it's a great documentation of the actual road. So let it be noted.
Yeah. Well, that'd be interesting to see, because every time I've ever ridden it, it was been pretty badly beaten up. You know.
There's huge water bars now.
Yeah. It was always kind of a nightmarish downhill, because you always knew you were racing against the clock, you know. So no matter what, you tried to out time yourself, you know, on compared to your last run down. But it was always a terrifying experience for me.
Now for people that aren't from the Bay Area, can you describe to them what repack was?
Well, it's nearly 2-mile descent. I think when Gary Fisher, his fastest time at 4:22, it averaged out to about 30 miles an hour average. So you can you know, just picture how, and nobody wore protective gear. No one wore a helmet. You can see Charlie's got, you know, knee pads on and gloves in this image, and elbow pads. He was probably one of the more highly protected guys that raced. But for the most part, we were just slamming down that, and we were. I'm really not even sure what we were thinking, because it was so crazy. It was so daredevil. The most the real thing you wanted to do is just get down alive.
Yeah, I think it's another picture from here.
Yeah.
And I saw in the notes that it said it was a 1944 Schwinn, and you were talking earlier about, because this was just so new that, people were adding stuff to bikes, they were figuring them out. And obviously, a lot of people probably didn't have a lot of chance to test.
Right.
Technology was changing, and people were still figuring this out at the time. And was it scary? Was it exciting? It was probably a combination.
It was a combination of both. I remember being at the top of Repack the few times that I did race, and I was having trouble just keeping my legs and feet on the pedals, because I was shaking so hard. And I was I related a story just recently about my one wipeout where I ended up in this culvert and I couldn't get out. My bike weighed so much that pulling it out and getting myself out at the same time was almost impossible. And these guys are flying by me and, can we help you? No, just go, I'll do it myself. It was, it was a time consuming thing, but some of the guys just knew it like the back of their hand. Like Joe knew where all the turns were and how fast he could come and slide into a turn or whatever. And at one point, there was a gate about 3/4 of the way down. So people would have to stop and slide under the gate. And there was a funny story because one time Larry and I think we were out at Point Reyes after a wildfire, and the road crew was part of the MMWD, and we found a whole set of keys, and it turned out one of the keys fit that lock on the gate. So we were able to unlock the gate before the races, and it just eliminated that anxiety, especially for the newcomers who didn't know exactly where that gate was. So it always their level of anxiety was a lot higher. But once that gate was open, it was like a full steam ahead. So that was a pivotal moment in the Repack history, finding that key. What are the odds?
Hey, Zach, I know you like to go downhill. So look at Joe Breeze. So Wendy was talking about how well he knows it.
Yeah.
Imagine full speed getting into that position where he is. Look at where most of the lines are to the outside, right?
Yeah.
So that's a difference of several seconds. What he just did there compared to the people outside with the foot out of the pedal. Like that's like he knows exactly where he wants to be. That's just a fantastic shot. I love it.
Yeah. Well, he's the one who also made that map of Repack, and he had all these turns and dips, and they were all nicknamed, like Camera Corner.
Yeah, I bet.
A reference to where everybody hung out. Camera Corner was where most of the crashes occurred. So that's where all the spectators were, and that's where the photographers hung out, because most likely not only were people showcasing their talents or lack of there, but they were the most spectacular crashes. Fortunately, no one got seriously hurt. There was a broken wrist and a broken collarbone, and I think that was the extent of the major damage. So we got pretty lucky.
Wendy, I wanted to ask you about Tam Rancho because I did last year, Vernon, the Access for Bikes. They did an enduro, and to give them a plug, they've been doing lots, and they're doing it again, which has always been a great place to ride. And back in the nobular days of racing.
Yeah.
But those trails were the same, I guess, the same names, B17 and Serpentine. And that place has quite a legacy.
No, not at all. That wasn't put in until the early 90s when the Marin Trails Council started working out there. They got permission from the Boy Scouts.
Those were later.
We didn't have any of that back in the
Just
day.
had the fire roads, just the roads.
Yeah, we only had the fire roads and whatever little single tracks we made ourselves. You know, we kind of did a little bushwhacking and called that pruning ourselves. So we kind of formed whatever little single track trails we had. We made them ourselves. In this enduro race right here, we this was at the top of going up to Repack, just before the turn to Oat Hill, I believe. And this was an enduro race that Charlie and Alan Bonds had laid out, and there was quite a group effort. You can see that everybody came out for this race, and several people got lost because the race course wasn't very well laid out. In fact, Charlie got so lost that we had a big barbecue afterwards, and he rolled in when it was dark, almost dark. So he got really lost out there. But there were, this was the first cross country race that we put on, and it was a fun event. It went down through Carson Creek, down to the Pump Road, and back up the old Yee, and it was a pretty, it was an intense loop. It was fun though. It was fun. Yeah. Oh, this is a great shot.
I'll come back to. Well, I'll go back to the other.
There's so many favorite shots.
Yeah. And this one, like, obviously, probably not a tandem race, but just people discovering what you could do with bikes now. I mean, I know it's probably a lot of people wouldn't advise that, but
this one is so politically incorrect, with no helmet. The kid is like holding on for dear life. This is my neighbor Fred, my late neighbor Fred Wolf, and this is his son Zuzu, and this is coming off the backside of White's Hill at Tamarancho. So we'd already gone to the top, and he's just screaming down this. He's probably doing 30 miles an hour. You can see that that dust trail behind him, and this is a classic. So reckless. This one was taken by my ex-husband. This was a family friend of ours. This was out at Point Reyes, and I just love the wildflowers in front of her, and you can just see the smile on her face. This is her first time on a mountain bike, and she's digging it so much.
I mean, Meg, I don't know if you're in the same feeling as me. I mean, I'm not as well versed in all the trails, but if I don't, I definitely understand the terrain, and it's amazing. Like, these photographs are almost 50 years old, but it's just the time, the place, and the joy that people share of using these trails are still universal. And it's just, it's a feeling that you guys had initially, and it's amazing how it still holds.
Well, you have to understand that back in the day, we had everything to ourselves. We had unlimited access to every single trail because there were no rules. There were no regulations because nobody knew about us, We were so under the radar that as far as anyone else was concerned, we didn't exist. The only people we had any conflicts were the equestrians and the Sierra Club occasionally. But for the most part, we were in such remote places, we had access to places that most hikers couldn't get to in a day. So we took full advantage of Marin County. I mean, we covered every last square inch of, anything within 20 miles of the house. And Tamarancho, Tamarancho's right in my back door. So it's, 2 minutes away. Yeah. That's where I took my very first bike ride.
Yeah. So. And to the point of the discovery, like the book that's in front of me right now, it's the one on top of Pine Mountain with Otis and those guys, right? And it's very likely that I'm going to go to that exact spot tomorrow. And the beauty of Marin from the Golden Gate Bridge all the way to Novato is that even though there's more people, if I go on a Thursday, I'll probably see 8 cyclists and I'll know 4 of them.
Yeah,
So
right.
so this sense of discovery and openness and the smiles, you know, that's something that we all still love about biking, is that you could have a 12-year-old out for the first time and they're going to have that same, it's this sense of joy.
Yeah.
That it's not like we owned it because we did it first, that it's to see other people do it. It's like, that's why I keep doing what I do and why we all do what we do, because we just know you see someone and they have that look and you're like, oh, I know that look.
Yeah. It is a universal joy. And one of my favorite, when I traveled back to Crested Butte, you know, way back in the day, we did one bike ride called Oh Be Joyful. And that's what I kind of encapsulate. All that experience was Oh Be Joyful, because it just really stated precisely everything that we were feeling. You just couldn't help it. It was like you were bursting at the seams, you know? I mean, we explored these places that you would never have guessed that they were there, you know? And Fred, especially, he was kind of a rebel. He'd go out on his motorcycle occasionally and scope out these places, you know, and know if we could get under the gate or climb the fence or whatever. So, you know, we were rebels with a cause.
What's your thought, Wendy, with, you know, as photographer back then, like you mentioned, you had to have the equipment, and now everyone has their cell phone, and there's so many photos and they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you think that adds to or distracts from, or do you have a view? The sharing, telling, and the content. I mean, there's a lot to that, but what do you think about the capturing of the moment and the focus on?
I think it's great. I think it's wonderful that people, then you can share, you know, and then there's more joy involved, you know. So it's the wider you can, you know, scatter the joy. I think that's a really positive thing. So I love seeing the new images, but you know, there is something classic and old school about the old Kodachrome, you know, the blue sky, and it just, and then especially the fact that I had to lug all that equipment, you know, in my backpack, and it was just such a challenge, but it never occurred to me that this was going to inconvenience me in any way. You know, the thing is, I was never a real strong rider, so I was always comfortable at the rear. And if I did have an opportunity to get ahead and kind of stage whatever photo I was going to shoot, you know, I took full advantage of it. And those guys pretty much let me. They, you know, I'd always tell them, well, I'm going to go ahead a little bit and see if I can get a couple shots or whatever. So they were always cooperative. Oh, wow.
Yeah, like this is an amazing shot.
Yeah.
I don't care. And that's, you know, yeah, the technology has changed, but there's just something about these photos that are just timeless.
Yeah. That's it. It's like I said, it's like going back in a time machine and seeing, you know, in real life what it was like. And it was just, this kid was almost ready to lay this up right here. I think he only did this one time, but this is a pretty dramatic image right here. Yeah. I love this shot.
And so I haven't, I guess, focused in too much on the bikes themselves, but you know, in some way you're just like, you know, they're not that different from what we probably have nowadays. Gearing's a little bit different materials, but you know, the makings of a bicycle, it's a pretty simple machine when you really think about it. And you know, looking like close up at the bike like this, you know, bikes aren't universally different now in terms of, like, you know, you have a chain,
wheels, right,
gears.
Well, the chain, right?
Yeah, wheels are about the same size.
Yeah.
So you know, just looking at this, you're just like, okay, it's pretty relatable. I see a derailleur there, so, or front derailleur. So Yeah, just, so much symmetry that I think, like, when people look back, like, it wasn't that different in terms of, people just hopping on a bike, and you've got two wheels to take you downhill.
Right. I would point out, though, that there was a huge difference in the weight.
Yes.
And that was probably what distinguished today's bikes from yesterday's bikes, because we were lugging 50-plus pound bikes, pushing them uphill. Now you can ride these 22-pound bikes, with multiple gears. We were lucky if we had 5 gears. And this looks like, there's probably more than, yeah. So this is Fred Wolf in this shot. This was taken during the drought, and we had ridden from Alpine Dam all the way to Kent Lake, and then all the way to Shafter Dam that day. And this is probably the only moisture that we encountered, and it probably all ended up right on his legs and wheels right there.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, I'm looking at the tire there. Like, did that tire actually fit on that frame?
Yeah. Right. That's a great shot.
Well, this is quite a few steps up from the clunker, right? Because they've got a cassette and a drum brake and
this
front derailleur, and there's 2 gears. So this is a pretty evolved version of the bikes.
Right. We were kind of learning as we went and upgrading our gear, but we didn't have a lot to choose from back in the day, because you just didn't go into a bike shop and buy clunker gear. So I mean, we used motorcycle gear and whatever, tandem gear, whatever. Tires weren't really readily available, and I heard a story of, in fact, I think I was at Gary Fisher's house the day that he was using an X-Acto knife on one of his fat tires just to get more traction. That was way back in the day.
So speaking of older bikes, so at our first event at Low Gap, Jackie Phelan was out, and she had on the back of her bike 40-year-old gravel bike. So she's on her Cunningham that Charlie built with the drop bars. So to see the lasting quality, I know Zach being a gravel guy, we can't help but mention the overlapping, how quickly people, because we talked about sharing technology with the road and cyclocross that, and then, Tomac and then Specialized had the drop bar bike. So it was great to see Jackie, first of all, and then to see her in toe clips and to see her in drop bars on gravel, which was mountain bike, which is just a fun bike.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, she was one of the first really to get on, well, what is now a gravel bike. And I'm sure that when she first appeared on the scene, I compared her to a unicorn. We were just so stunned to see her. She showed up on the 80, I think it was 1980 or 81 Appetite Seminar. So we were at the top of Smoker's Knoll on the Pine Mountain Loop, and she shows up on a 3-speed girl's bike with a basket, and she had ridden her bike from the city all the way, and then she continued the whole loop. Apparently, she to this day says it's the hardest ride she ever took in her life. But we were so stunned to see her. It was like something had just flown in and planted itself there, that we were incredulous that she could have ridden from the city on that bike and just maintained and powered through it like she did. She was just an animal.
Do you have any photos of that?
No, I don't. There's one photo Dave Epperson, the famous photographer, took. I think that photo is floating around somewhere. But yeah, it's the first sighting of Jackie Phelan, so it's very historically representative of her and her bike.
I'll keep going.
Oh, I love the shot.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of even when we're riding nowadays. I don't know if people kick up this much dust, and I don't know if this is just because the bikes are that much heavier, or people are just really...
It's a kick brake, dude.
For
your kid's bike, if you push backwards, that you have to totally lock it up. They're locking up. That's what's so amazing to me, the times of those, that you'd have to basically have a controlled drifting skid around the corner.
Right. Plus it was during the drought, so that might account for the excess dust, because it was really dusty out there sometimes.
That's the first Camelback too. He should have marketed that. Look at that.
Right. And I haven't been to one of the dawn patrols there on Maltam. I think it's every Friday and Sunday, but this, I'm sure this takes you back. And
this was actually on Mount Barnaby, and this was a moonlight sunrise ride, because we didn't start until about 2 in the morning. Fred worked at a liquor store in town, and he didn't get off until 2 in the morning, and we were counting on him for transportation. So we said, okay, we'll just hang and wait. And Fred, he had the foresight to pack in some coffee, a thermos of hot coffee and donuts. So after pushing all the way to the top, for 2 hours, we get to the top, and he breaks out these treats, and we watch these. There were Jesus rays that broke through. When we got to the top, it was all fogged in, so we couldn't see anything. And then all of a sudden, everything parted, and these Jesus rays came out, and the sun came out, and it was amazing. This really, half these people are not with us anymore. So this really, just goes right to my heart of hearts. And I love this shot. It's one of my all-time favorites. You can see again the joy. Just people are just so blissed out.
Yeah, I think that's what brings a smile to our faces too. It's like, these moments are, these are specific people, but it's universal. That feeling that we share, and over time, everyone keeps going to the, there's something in the power of getting yourself up there by yourself, and just the reward. And it's a unique experience. We don't get to do it every day. And then when you get to do it with people that it's an experience, like, it's one of my favorite parts of why I bike.
It was a powerful emotional bonding, because like I said, we kind of were like a little cult. There were just so few of us that, every chance that we got to share that experience, we took full advantage of it. And like I said, we had the whole county to ourselves. So, we got to pick and choose whatever we wanted to do. And we had no one telling us we couldn't do it.
How did your I guess we don't, nowadays people think too much about it, but do people care much when people were taking photos, or people like, at the time, or?
I think I was just kind of discreet about it for the most part, and I didn't make a big deal about it, but it was all candid shots, and people were just pretty much relaxing or checking out their gear or whatever, just doing their thing. And it was such a spontaneous, click, 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 and people just got used to it.
It just
here's a great shot.
Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah. Here's you can see Steve Potts in the background, and then there's Scott Nickel in the foreground here. And this was a group ride out to Point Reyes. This was way back in the day, like this is probably 1980 or something. We'd kind of just met Scott, And we bonded with him immediately. He was one of us. You know, anytime we met someone who was one of us, it was like, get over here. We love you.
That's a great one. Scott, I first met Scott growing up in Sebastopol. I think so. I met him in '89, and he was still building out of his house and knew Wes Williams.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and he I made a list of folks, you know, because I was reading the Radavist article where we talked about the golden age, and I was just thinking of riders that are still out that I see. You know, I ride with Otis Sky at the events, and I talked to Tom Ritchie. Jimmy Deaton's been coming out, and of course Scott Nickel and Jackie and Steve Gravenitis and George Hope and Steve Blick. It's just like you said, this tribe that's just, it's grown, but just to see people still,
well, if it's in your blood, it just doesn't go away. You know, it's like there, it's a transfusion. I kind of always responded in that way. I kind of thought it was like a soul transfusion to get out on a bike ride, you know, and just cleanse yourself. It was such a almost a redeeming experience. You know, you work so hard, and then, like you said, the reward was so powerful to share that moment where, you know, you get to the top of this incredible climb and you see this view, or you share an orange or a joint or something, or a frisbee, and it's just this rolling party constantly. And like, I was one of the more fortunate ones because I was able to do this. I had a lot of free time. Well, I made free time. I kind of got myself into a bind, you know, and just let my career fall by the wayside while I pursued this new passion. But I made so many friends, you know, just, it was an incredible amount of talent back then too. You know, the new blood that came in every time there was a new person. They always have some new idea, or they always brought something to the table, you know, whether it was just the enthusiasm or some actual technical advancement. So it was a great way to see this new recreational thing grow. It was like a drug in a way, you know, because you just couldn't get enough of it. I mean, I woke up, I rode my mountain bike like 76 days in a row or something. And it was like, I just couldn't get enough. I was the first thing in the morning, as soon as I woke up, like the floor, and I have a really great view to the northwest. So I just look out the window, see what the weather's doing, and then gauge my ride according to what the weather was doing. You know, I got another couple hours before the rain hits, or, you know, I'll take my chance. And if I get wet, so what, blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, I'll go to the coast if it's too hot to ride inland. So it became a lifestyle that became just, you know, that's all I could think about. I was almost obsessed. I guess just an addiction, but a good one.
I love to hear your passion about it, even still now. I mean,
it's even today. In fact, when I was in Crested Butte back in September, I was interviewed, and I had to apologize afterwards because I was flailing my arms around and spittle was coming out of my mouth, and my eyes started rolling back in my head, and like, I became this, you know, transformed kind of monster. It really got under my skin just from in fact, my first ride was horrible. I hated it. Fred Wolf and my ex took me out to Tamarancho on a hot, August afternoon, and on single track, and it was terrifying. I was afraid I was going to fall off the side, and I got to, 2 miles in, and I said, I'm never doing this again. This sucks. So gradually, Fred Wolf, he was a kind of a naturalist, and he knew that I had this passion for the outdoors. So he kind of enticed me. It was like chumming, you know. I know where the wildflowers, I know where the red larks were growing, and if we rode our bikes out there, we could get there twice as quick. So let's do that. So he was really instrumental in getting me you know, to a point where I felt comfortable on the bike and I wanted to do it. And I guess it probably took a couple rides before I was totally indoctrinated.
Now, I still have a lot of photos to get through, but maybe we'll just save for another time. But the next one just kind of happens to be probably like the inverse of you getting into it.
Yeah.
And this just happens like I don't care what time period this photo was taken, but this this is quite scary.
Yes, it's scarier than it looks scarier than it actually was, because it looks like it's only about 3 feet across that trail, but it was more like 5. You know, I mean, Joe took this photo of Charlie and I. This was in Mineral King, and we were probably the only people who were ever, you know, in Mineral King on a mountain bike, because shortly after we were there, they caught wind of us or what we were attempting to do. And I guess they shut off any kind of, you know, vehicular, recreational vehicles, I guess, were not allowed anymore. So they considered us recreational vehicles. But yeah, this was one of my all-time favorite rides. This was, we were preempting for our first trip to Crested Butte. So we decided, Charlie, Joe, and I decided to go to Joe's cabin in Mineral King for a week and do some high altitude riding. But the thing is, when we first got there, there was like a typhoon that came in and wiped out the whole trail access. So not on this particular ride, but the day after this ride, we did a 30-mile ride. It took 12 hours because most of the trail had been washed out and we had to stumble through the dark. We got back to camp. We got back to his cabin like 10 at night in the pitch dark. And it was scary because we'd run out of food. We had plenty of water, but there was no food. So it was one of those memorable, very challenging rides that it's probably my all-time favorite ride. Mineral
Wendy,
King.
when you went out towards Crested Butte and in Colorado, did you find that there were more women riding? Because I know you were one of the first couple in Marin County, but what was it like in Colorado and Crested Butte?
Well, there were apparently a couple of women, but you know, we did the Pearl Pass tour. That's why we went out there. And there was one woman who went as far as the base camp, which was really impressive because she was on a antique, you know, vintage mountain bike, and I was on my Breezer. So I had the advantage of that, you know, lightweight, new technology. But I was kind of impressed that there were any women at all. The guys were hardcore firefighters, fire jumpers, you know, and the crusty beer drinkers, you know. But we loved Crested Butte. We just completely fell in love with that place. It was like our sister city in a way, because we bonded immediately with all those people. And I had the best time when I was there last September, probably the best time of my whole life on a bike. And I'm glad I took advantage, because I had been Charlie and a couple of us had been invited by a group of Germans. And I was kind of hesitant at first. I thought there's no way, you know, that I can do Pearl Pass. But on second thought, I thought, you know what? Why not? So it was the best decision I ever made, because I swear to God, I'm still Rocky Mountain High. I am just so tingly when I think about it. I had the best time. It just brought back so many memories of, you know, I hadn't been there since '81. So it was amazing. It was just amazing.
So I'll take the opportunity to take a little poke at Zach, Gravel Bike California here, who doesn't own a mountain bike. So having started the hoppers, which I didn't really mean to start gravel. I just want to do fun bike rides, you know, but like there's people that are discovering mountain biking, and I'm just like, what do you mean you're discovering mountain biking?
Oh,
Like it's like it's the default bike to ride.
yeah, yeah.
And I haven't convinced Zach of that, but Zach, the Holy Land, you should point it in Crested Butte, and don't send me photos of you on your gravel bike. Send me photos of you on your new mountain bike. Right? Wouldn't you say, Wendy, that Zach needs a mountain bike?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I've never ridden a gravel bike, so I don't know. I dabbled in cyclocross, which was kind of like, you know, a hybrid kind of thing, but I've never done gravel. So one of these days, I just had my first e-bike experience in Crested Butte, and that was amazing. I was pretty much on the fence this, you know, for the past whatever years. And, you know, I was going to, I don't know. But once I got on it and I got the hang of it, man, oh man, was that fun. It's a blast. It really elevates the whole experience, you know, especially for, you know, someone getting on in age. It really brings you back. I can do this.
Well, I mean, for me, you know, what's most important is just the universal feeling of exploration.
Yeah.
And, you know, and especially being part of a community like this, and, you know, being able to share, you know, these places, you know, these unique trails, and, you know, the feeling of accomplishment that, you know, we did it ourselves.
Right.
It was kind of funny. I don't know if Vic's still on here, but we just did something silly called the LA Tourist Race, which we didn't quite finish, but, you know, it was something with the four of us all together. It's just fun doing it together. And, you know, it's a beauty part of cycling. I used to run, and you just don't have the same type of, you know, working together type of feeling as you are with bikes. And yeah, these are just so fantastic. And I think, you know, I'm, you know, Meg, this is just so relatable, right?
Right. Well, that was the beauty of the mountain bike back in the day, is that this is something you can feel comfortable on. You know, it's not a skinny, tired, you know, racing bike, which was pretty much the only option we had. And it just was the most practical convenience. You know, you just got on your mountain bike and you went and did your errands, or you went on a bike ride, you know, a real ride or whatever. It was an all-purpose bike. It was so, how come we never thought of that before? You know, I like to think back on so many instances in my previous life where if I'd had a mountain bike, boy, wouldn't life have been better back then, you know? I mean, I can go back, you know, several years prior to when I was introduced to the mountain bike and think, because I lived off grid for a while up near Ukiah. And God, if I'd had a mountain bike then in 1970, I could have, you know, gone everywhere on that thing. Or, you know, I went to Baja way back in the late 60s. And if I'd had a mountain bike, I could have done some exploring there. I lived in Mill Valley at the end of the Pipeline Trail. And boy, if I'd had a mountain bike then, I could have gotten all the way up to the top of the mountain, you know, in 1968. It kind of, but then, you know, I do live where I live, and that was the most practical place to have a mountain bike, is right next door to Tamarancho. Like I said, I can literally just walk out there in, you know, 2 or 3 minutes. So, and you can go all the way to the ocean, 22 miles from Tamarancho, and never see, you know, any private property. So we had this vast expanse of possibilities in front of us. And like I said, we took full advantage of what we knew we had. And it's kind of funny because Otis was always telling us, don't tell anyone, you know, once word gets out. But then the thing is, at one point, Joe and Otis were, I mean, way back in the day, they were hanging out on Mount Tam, and it was blustery and rainy, and they're both covered in mud. And Joe looks at Otis and he says, "Boy, this sure is fun. But who the hell would want to do this? Who else would want to do this?" So it's kind of like, it's really fun, but there's only a certain type of person who's going to straddle a 56-pound bike and, pack it up, a backside of a mountain somewhere. So we were a tough breed. Oh, yeah, we all kind of had this sense of adventure in us, so we were willing to whatever it took, any kind of pain threshold we could cross over, all in the pursuit of the adventure.
Well, Wendy, hang on. We're going to say goodbye to the outside world here. But I'd like to thank you for everyone here for coming on. This was amazing, and we'd love to have you back and talk more and see more pictures.
I'd love that. I'd really love that, and I'd like to give a little plug for the past couple of years. The Radavist online magazine has supported me 100%, and we're in the process of doing a beautiful little film about the images. They got on board, and they have been the most incredible advocates for my images, and I am so grateful it was the right time to take on this project. I am thrilled. I can hardly wait for it to happen, but it's been in the works for a couple of years. So soon we're going to see the final, reality of it.
Oh. Well, we'll talk more about it soon, but thanks again for coming on. And Mig, this has been great, right?
It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for finally connecting. And the more I talk about it, the more enthused I get. I just kind of have. It's taken on a life of its own with these images. And up until fairly recently, I didn't understand the full impact of the history, because I just kind of always assumed that people, would be interested and they weren't that knowledgeable about the beginnings, the humble beginnings. But it's been a real process and a real eye-opener, and I'm having the time of my life just sharing these images with other people. So it's been cool.
Well, like I said, hold on, but thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone that came in. So
you're more than welcome. I've had a great time. Thank you.
All right.